Can I say one thing, though, on Sanders' attacks on Biden? I think before you start talking about the corporate billionaires and all the rest of the stuff supporting Biden, there are at least three things you have to remember. Number one, Biden had no money. So the idea that he was supported by corporate billionaires when he beat Sanders was sort of hard to imagine. Two, no individual can give more than $2,800. I don't think Joe Biden or Bernie Sanders or Eddie Glaude could be bought for $2,800. I think that's ludicrous to say. And thirdly, the point that was made was, of course, the people who elected him in South Carolina were hardly the corporate establishment, as we were talking about earlier.
Yeah, Eddie, you were sort of shaking your head as we listened. That's been the case for Bernie Sanders. That's been the case of his whole campaign, the argument for it, which is that we are representing working people, which he is. That's his platform. And the other candidates are tools, effectively, of the corporate establishment. That argument loses a little steam, it seems to me, after Super Tuesday, after the kind of voters who elected Joe Biden in all those states.
Right. It requires a little nuance. And it's hard to have nuance in our political conversation, and particularly in the heat of a political battle. But he needs to make a distinction between those who vote, right, and then the political elites and the establishment that he's trying to refer to. I mean, it makes sense to me to say that James Clyburn is part of the political establishment. It makes sense to me to talk about the way in which Klobuchar and Buttigieg and others, and now Bloomberg, have consolidated behind Joe Biden to begin to talk about them in a particular sort of way. But you can't conflate that with voters. The democratic process is messy. People will make choices at the polls. If you are a Democrat, small d, you want to give as much legitimacy to folk making decisions on voting day, on the voting day, as you can. And you know what? On Super Tuesday, Bernie Sanders got his behind handed to him. He needs to go back and think why, kind of assess what happened, and to kind of describe it all as this corporate establishment, blah, 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 that's too flat-footed. Right? Let's be more nuanced, and let's get the messaging right if you're really thinking about transforming the lives of everyday ordinary people, and do so in a way that has faith in the democratic process.
Well, you know, it really also, Eddie, makes him look ridiculous, because for 3 months we were talking about how Joe Biden had no money. Joe Biden was broke. Joe Biden's campaign couldn't spend money in Super Tuesday states. You take Virginia, I think the guy maybe spent $100,000 in Virginia. I mean, how many millions did Bernie spend there? I mean, Biden won without any money. He won with hardly any political organization. He won on momentum, reputation, and name recognition. So, Willie, Eddie's right. When Bernie's going around spouting these talking points about he's bought by corporate billionaires who won the race for him. Oh. No, it was black voters in Orangeburg, South Carolina, in Petersburg, Virginia, in Demopolis, Alabama, all, in Nashville, Tennessee. These are states where Joe Biden didn't spend any money. These are states where people made the decision on their own. For Bernie Sanders, I mean, he's being a one-trick pony here, talking about Joe Biden bought and owned by corporate. It doesn't work on Biden, because he was dead broke on Super Tuesday, and Bernie had millions and millions and millions of dollars in the bank, which is fine. He spent it. That's great. But money didn't decide Super Tuesday. Something much bigger decided Super Tuesday. And that something much bigger was the question of, who do you trust?
Yeah.
Who do you trust to beat Donald Trump? And who do you trust to return normalcy to the United States of America's federal government? Those exit poll questions about, do you want to have Obama-like policies, or do you want to go even further left? I mean, those exit polls, it wasn't close. They want the return to the normalcy that they saw with Barack Obama and Joe Biden in the White House.
Yeah, and you can add a couple of other states where Joe Biden didn't play. Less influential were the African-American voters there, but more white suburban votes, and that's Minnesota and Massachusetts, the state next door to Bernie Sanders' home state of Vermont. Joe Biden won those states as well. And Bernie Sanders at that press briefing yesterday, we just heard where he was railing against the establishment, also talked about low turnout. He didn't turn out voters the way he thought he would. Young people didn't come out to vote for him, and he obviously did not expand his base of support. He said that out loud. That's not just political analysis. He knows that,
Right.
and he knows if he's going to do better coming up, he's going to have to change that. It's just unclear how exactly he all of a sudden will be able to court African-American voters, for example, in a way he did not on Tuesday.
Yeah, but he didn't turn out voters, Mika, but you know who did? Joe Biden. Here's a lead from the New York Times. They were disaffected Republicans in affluent Washington suburbs. They were shipyard employees in Norfolk, and they were healthcare workers in Petersburg. They all came together on Super Tuesday in an extraordinary surge to the polls in Virginia to lift Joe Biden to victory.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.